backgrounds. Today, far too many employees live with the quiet fear that what they believe or what they perceive to believe could jeopardize their livelihood. This fear is not about workplace misconduct or violent ideology. It's about holding peaceful, lawful, and often sometimes these political opinions being punished simply because those opinions clash with prevailing culture or manager's bias. First of all, stating what is the definition of discrimination in the face of political stances. We believe that political discrimination in employment refers to the unjust treatment of individuals in hiring, firing, promotion, or workplace inclusion on the basis of their lawful, peaceful political beliefs, affiliations, or expressions, when those beliefs have no direct or substantial impact on their ability to do the job. This can include hiring bias, workplace hostility, firing, or demotion. We're not protecting violent extremism, hate speech, or discriminatory conduct disguised as political belief. If your political stance is expressed legally, peacefully, and separately from your work performance, it should not be a reason to harm your employment. Moving on to our 3 points of setup. First of all, what does the status quo look like and why is it harmful? A, there's no consistent legal protection of individuals' political beliefs, which leaves people very vulnerable. While most of the democracies legally protects religion, gender, and race in employment law, political ideology is often left out. This gap allows for unchecked employer discretion. Some people might face job consequences not for poor performance, but simply for a Facebook post, a protest they attended, or the party they support. The legal vacuum leads to inconsistent judgments, fear-driven silence, and also hidden prejudice. B, this harms marginalized voices and discourages participation in civic life. Ironically, the people who are most likely to be targeted are not radicals, but those with minority, dissenting, or unpopular political opinions. Employees are often just forced to play it safe, withdraw from activism, or lie about their views. In practice, this silences union organizers, racial justice advocates, climate activists, and also those in conservative professionals who are socially liberal, all of whom who are punished for not a action but for a thought. C, it creates a chilling effect in society and becomes a toxic culture at work. It leads to ideological homogeneity where people are not along out of fear, not for belief. This undermines both the corporate ethics and also democratic culture. Second of all, what is our model? The policy will be implemented by the National Labor Human Rights Commission, depending on jurisdiction, which already oversees workplace discrimination laws, and it applies to every single public and private sector except for the roles where political views are necessary, for example, politicians, election officials, etc. This does not include hate speech, incitement to violence, or extremist views that violate democratic norms or laws. Political speeches must be peaceful, legal, and external to core job responsibilities. If someone is, say, an HR officer and their political beliefs contract DEI principles and they are expected to uphold their role, reasonable workplace requirements still apply. This law does not make political ideology a protected class in a way that overrides essential job functions. The status quo and even regulations aimed at political discrimination do not eliminate the underlying bias employers hold towards political views, and this can perpetuate an environment where those with minority or unpopular views are systematically excluded. What are both sides' burdens? Our burden is to basically prove that a ban on political discrimination upholds fairness, protects fundamental freedom, and fosters inclusion without compromising the overall workplace environment. Their burden, on the other hand, is to define a system where people can legally lose their job for not doing what they not for what they do, but for what they believe. OP must prove that political views are just materially different from the protected characteristics, for example, race, gender, or religion, etc. If political views are like race or religion, then discrimination is unjustifiable. So OP must draw a hard line showing why political belief deserves less protection. Even if they say some views are bad, they must defend the absence of any protection at all, which is a world where employers get to play the political gatekeepers unchecked. Moving on to our contentions, we will mainly present two, and our partner will extend on the last one. The first contention is freedom of thought and expression. The thesis of this claim is basically that banning political discrimination in employment safeguards the fundamental right to freedom and thought for expression, which is essential for a democratic and diverse society. A, political expression is a core to human right. The ability for individuals to uphold and express political opinions is protected as a fundamental right in many democratic societies. Under international human rights frameworks, the freedom of expression is recognized as essential to the dignity and autonomy of individuals. Political beliefs are just integral part of this freedom as they directly influence the individual's understanding of society, governments, and their role in shaping political discourse. Second of all, it safeguards democratic views and social justice. In democratic societies, political freedom is a cornerstone of justice and equity. By ensuring that employees are not discriminated against just simply based on their political views, we maintain the integrity of democracy itself. Discrimination based on political opinions creates an environment of fear rather than fostering healthy debate and inclusivity in the workplace. Political expression in the workplace is essential to ensure fairness and equal opportunity. If we allow individuals to be judged simply because of their political views, it creates a dangerous precedent where people are penalized for beliefs that are protected by law. C. This prevents unnecessary division and conflict. Banning political discrimination prevents unnecessary division and conflict within society by ensuring that political views, however devised, does not become a barrier to professional opportunity. When political views are allowed to influence bringing firing or hiring decisions, it creates polarized environments where individuals are forced to hide or change their beliefs to fit in with a dominant ideology or environment in the workplace. This is especially harmful in politically charged environments where individuals must be pressured into adopting specific viewpoints to keep their jobs or to avoid retaliation. Our second contention is promoting social cohesion and reducing political polarization. The thesis of this claim is that banning political discrimination in employment helps to reduce political polarization and promotes social cohesion by fostering more inclusive and diverse communities. A. This prevents political ideologies from dividing society. When political views are used as a criteria for employment judgment or decisions, society becomes increasingly divided along with ideological lines. Individuals who work differently who work by differing political beliefs are at risk of exclusion, creating segregated environment forces where certain groups are overrepresented while others are systematically marginalized. The polarization extends beyond the workplace and into the communities, creating a us versus them mentality when political identity becomes more important than shared goals when mutual respect. B. It encourages productive political dialogue. The workplace is one of the most common settings for individuals to interact with each other from different walks of life. When political discrimination is banned, people from a range of political perspectives can engage in productive discussions, helping to bridge the political divide. And C. It mitigates the risk of social fragmentation or radicalization. By preventing discrimination based on political views, we reduce the likelihood of social fragmentation and minimize the risk of radicalization within certain political groups. Let's imagine in a scenario where certain political views are regularly discriminated against, members of these groups may become very delusional and more susceptible to extremist ideologies. Feeling excluded from the mainstream society or unable to express themselves openly, individuals just turn to more extreme or fringe political movements that promise to validate their beliefs and give them a sense of belonging. Let's mention the general impact, which is ensuring fairness and workplace equity. A. Political discrimination undermines the merit-based hiring system. Banning it ensures that hiring is based on skills and qualifications, not personal beliefs. And B. Political neutrality fosters greater workplace harmony. When employers focus on performance over politics of the individuals, it reduces conflict and improves teamwork, thus benefiting the productivity. And C. By eliminating political bias, we promote a more inclusive society where people from all walks of life contribute to the workforce. Therefore, please vote for government. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Leader of OP of the floor. Please to take an accept for your eyes.
Am I audible at this volume?
Yes.
I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Some rebuttals for the House today. Firstly, proposition came out to tell that as ironically, they are not radicals and mostly are minorities, and they create a homogeneous society and also creates chilling effects. This happens because they fundamentally enter a field which is inherent on the other side of their political views. Other workers are entitled to the feeling not at ease due to the difference, and we should acknowledge that their performance will be affected in the workplace, while also being shunned by their peers. It's highly unlikely for the majority to all of the sudden feel accepting of the opposing political opinion and promote social cohesion. And this is what props wants to do, but they fail to provide a counterfactual to show how this will likely happen on their side. Therefore, the next best thing is to seclude them, to immediately stop them from being directly discriminated against in the workplace. So the benefits on our side is very certainly attainable and will help stop workplace hostility, and will help stopping workplace hostility is a faster duration of time. And since we are able to prove to you why our benefits can be materialized, we win this debate. And y'all mentioned that y'all only have peaceful, lawful views, but this is extremely uncharitable and is being choosy with what y'all want to debate about. And in the real life context, extremists exist. Extremists exist, and these minorities are the main people behind that stir of a hostile workplace. And y'all said that they will be at the risk of exclusion, but we see that this is symmetrical on your side. When they express their thought in such a workplace where like majority has opposing views, there'll definitely be like silent bullying or like exclusion, which I'm going to mention in my first substantive. Moving on to some characterization for the house today. We see that we heavily discourage discrimination, but we won't ban it. Two reasons. Firstly, people's rights. Secondly, tangible benefits for the employees in the workplace. We see that in status quo, discrimination only happens to like extremists because it actually affects their behavioral, right? And most employees don't care about like mainstream political beliefs, like left and right wing, as long as the employees remain respectful and professional. Discrimination usually occurs, no thank you, when views cross into extremism, like openly supporting hate groups, denying basic human rights, or promoting violence. This is because it will heavily impact the employees and the workplace by three reasons. Firstly, it will threaten the workplace safety and harmony. Firstly, employees with like extremist views like white supremacy and anti-LGBTQ beliefs may make others feel like unsafe or targeted, especially in like diverse teams. Secondly, it undermines the company's reputation. Hiring someone whose publicity support hateful or controversial ideologies can trigger backlash from customers, clients, or even the public, like boycott. Then it will lead to extreme views, harass others, or create a hostile environment. Thirdly, no thank you. There will be conflict with the company's mission or values, especially in like schools or healthcare. Having employees with opposing political views, like anti-vaccine views in a health organization, undermines the organization goals. See that even if you ban discrimination, opposing views will cause disruption in some way, and recognize that people have the right to choose who they want to work with, which I'll mention in my first substantive, where we better protect the minority and majority. Most people who are rejected from jobs due to political views are not regular citizens with harmless beliefs like what you think. In reality, those who face this kind of discrimination tend to hold extreme, harmful, and discriminatory ideologies, such as like white supremacy or anti-LGBTQ beliefs. These individuals quietly hold political opinions. Yes, I'll take a POI.
You claim that discrimination in workplace based on political views is justified for the sake of protecting vulnerable groups, but isn't that a contradiction? If we allow discrimination against certain political beliefs, aren't we creating a society where the rights of one group are sacrificed in favor of another? How do you justify?
We see that, like, as already mentioned, these like minorities, we see that the majority will still be able to accept them because obviously it doesn't affect behavioral or doesn't cause like significant harm to others, right? But this like discrimination or like extremist views will definitely cause like much harm, as I'll be mentioning in the later, like in my later sub. They promote hate, spread misinformation, and resist working with people they disagree with. This isn't about people, like someone supporting like a certain party or economic policy. Those views are usually tolerated. It's when views bleed into hateful behavior, like refusing to collaborate with certain races or making like comments that employers feel the need to act. And this shows that discrimination in these cases is not based on random political learnings, but on the real potential for harm. Because political beliefs do shape one like behavior, unlike gender, race, or nationality. And their beliefs on what is right and wrong will make them act differently towards different group of people. And this is why we should put pressure on them. By not forcing employees to hire people with these views, we create a safer, more cohesive, and more respectful workplace. For like the majority, this means they can work without the fear of being targeted, disrespected, or harassed by a colleague with extreme ideologies. They won't need to worry about a toxic environment or conflict that stems them from clashing values. Now, even if y'all don't buy that only extremists are discriminated against, the point still stands, because allowing employees to reject harmful political views create more benefits for both majority and minority workers. The harm of including these individuals is greater than the harm of excluding them. For minorities, the protection is even more crucial. In a world where discrimination still exists, having someone in the office who believes they are lesser or undeserving of rights put them directly at risk. Letting such individuals into the workplace just because we ban discrimination does not protect minorities. It exposes them. In fact, even if we ban political discrimination and these extremists are allowed in, minorities may still end up getting bullied, isolated, or subtly like harassed, especially if like they are the minority in numbers or have less power in like the workplace. So ironically, a policy meant to protect people from being discriminated against may lead to minorities being the one harmed instead. At the end of the day, like the cost of letting someone with extreme political views into a workplace is far greater than the cost of them not being hired. By allowing discrimination based on harmful ideologies, we give workplace the freedom to build environment that's safe, inclusive, and focused on respect. We empower the majority to strive without conflict, and we protect the minorities from these like discrimination. And moving on to my second substantive, we believe that companies should have the freedom to hire whoever they want to, which results in a better work environment, and how on prop is not realistic on their side to enforce this ban. On prop side, employers who are forced to like tolerate harmful political views, for example, a person who have like extremist views may claim protection on your side as you ban employment like discrimination on the basis of political viewpoints. Hence, is the company who are like close to like retain employees who are like harmful, rhetoric in their workplace. And on prop side, companies who strive on a shared mission are like forced to like retain this ideology employees who can hurt productivity. Although prop could argue that they have better productivity on their side, we see that this is simply not true. As on our side, as they all share a single political viewpoint, they will be working towards the same mission, hence uniting them even more, increasing the teamwork and productivity. Even if you don't buy what I've said above, it's very hard and basically unrealistic to run your policy. Defining like political discrimination is subjective. Some beliefs may overlap with like hate speech or extremism and should and like distinguishing politics from performance. An employee claims they were fired for their liberal views, but the employee says it was due to poor performance. Without clear evidence, courts will struggle to determine the real reason, which is why on our side, we have a better work environment because we protect people's political viewpoints better on our side. And this is so significant as we protect the political viewpoints of everyone, protecting everyone's right of being able to have an opinion. For all the I said, please side with side opposition.
Okay, thank you for sticking to time. Member of government.
Okay, so just to check, am I clearly audible?
Yes.
So if that's the case, then verb pure is preferred, sure her pronounced, and my time starts in 3, 2, 1, and go. Judge, the upside is fostering a world where every single employer is able to harass their employees or even unemploy them simply due to their political view. That is not what we really want to see in the prop side. People are afraid to express their ideas freely, and we don't really want that to happen here. So firstly, some clarifications. So we do believe that this debate is about good faith political beliefs that are non-disruptive to the workplace performance. This does not protect people who express their political views in a way that directly harms their co-workers, for example, harassment, hate speech, and etc. Secondly, they fail to answer our question of how they would be sacrificing a majority of people for minority groups who held extreme views here. They never answered it, and rather they dodged it, meaning that they have no direct answer to it. We do actually believe that if we allow the discrimination against extremists, it is contradictory with the line that between extremism and legitimate political views, and they can't simply ensure that this doesn't lead to a marginalization of vulnerable minority groups who may also be labeled as the extreme here, right? Certainly, to be clear, we're not banning employers from choosing specific workers that are based on qualifications, their skills, their job experience, and etc. What we are doing is simply trying to prevent discrimination based solely on political beliefs that do not really impact their ability. The job, right? No, thank you. Employers can still make hiring decisions based on their performance, their qualifications, and also their job fitness, but they cannot reject or simply penalize someone simply because that they have different political views with them. And we do actually believe that this stance will actually affect the workplace in a harmful or disruptive way on the upside here. Now moving on to some refutation. Firstly, we are on the argument of people's rights. We do believe that it's interesting that the opposition champions rights, quote unquote rights, when they talk about political views, but somehow denying people opportunities or simply discriminating against them because of their political beliefs that isn't exactly what we really call as a right here, right? So let's be clear. The right to actually express your political views doesn't really include the right to harm the others or to create a hostile working environment. That's not what we call as rights here. When political beliefs lead to discrimination or division, it really just undermines the importance of equality and fairness anyway. So let's not confuse the two. The freedom of thought with the freedom to harm others. What the upside is proposing is simply giving the employers the right to harm others, which we believe isn't the case that we want to see here. Secondly, on the point of how the employers have the right to hire whoever they want to. So we do believe that while it's true that companies have the right to hire employees based on their value, their needs, and also their political and also on their views towards society and etc.
No,
That does not give them the right to discriminate based on the political beliefs that have absolutely no influence on their job performance, right? To clarify, we're not simply banning the employers from hiring the employees who may be a better fit for the role based on their skills and also on their qualifications, but we do believe that political beliefs that do not really affect the ability to do the job and thus should not be a basis for hiring decisions. Before I move on to our third argument, sure.
do you think that incompetency caused by political views is not a valid reason to not hire them?
Okay, so we don't actually believe that there is a direct link between competency and also, the different political beliefs. We do actually believe that what our opponents is trying to do is that they are denying some people, employees the right to get a job simply because of their, political beliefs. We don't really think that that's valid, right? Since that everyone has the right to have their own beliefs, just as the LO has stated, and I don't really think that it's appropriate for our opponents to champion rights when they are denying people opportunities and also discriminating against them. We are actually banning discrimination, but we are actually banning the employers from choosing the people that they think are suitable for that job, but rather not based on political beliefs. However, our opponents is simply allowing discrimination to happen. There is a major difference between discrimination, discrimination and also the right here, right? So our opponents are allowing discrimination while we are not. We're simply respecting everyone's rights for their political views and stuff. So now moving on to our third argument on the point of echo chamber effects. So we do believe that banning employment discrimination based on political views actually prevents the formation of echo chambers in the workplace where everyone follows suit to the other political views and they are actually afraid to express their own ideas. That's not what we consider as equal rights for everyone. So two layers of analysis here. So firstly, we do believe that there would be workplace functionality within the organizations or the corporations. We do believe that the diversity of thought is crucial for innovation and also strong decision making. Our opponents stated that clashing ideas may harm workplace environment. However, we do believe in the exact opposite. We think that the diversity is necessary in order to foster an inclusive working place. Simply having one single idea and having one single political view isn't really beneficial for that workplace, since that it discourages innovation. No, thank you. We do believe that when employers only hire people who align with their political views, that they actually foster echo chambers, where environments where people feel pressure to agree with the dominant view and are afraid to express their own personal ideas or their minority ideas. No, thank you here. Secondly, on the point of societal values, so we do believe that by allowing the political discrimination, our opponents are simply contributing to a society where people may work, live, or socialize based on solely based on their political value. For example, in the US, this trend is already quite visible, right? So many tech companies, for example, in the Silicon Valley, have been criticized, for having pretty much progressive monoculture, while sectors like fossil fuels and finance are often perceived as learning conservatives. So we do believe that this division reduces the opportunities for mutual understanding and thus reduces the diversity in the workplace environment here. So now moving on to the impact and weight here. So we do believe that protecting the political diversity at work, well, it not only helps companies to strive, but they may also align with the democracy here. It builds habits of tolerance and also a diversified working environment where everyone can share their own personal beliefs rather than simply having to consider about the dominant belief of everyone else and having to silence their own voice in order to listen to others. Our opponents are simply discriminating the employees, and please note that, Judge, this debate is about discrimination, not really about whether we should hire someone or not. It's about discrimination. Our opponents are simply saying that they should encourage discrimination, which is clearly against the moral values here. Thus, we are very proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker, for that. Opposition, you have the floor.
Can I check?
Opposition. Yes, you are.
Okay, I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. So firstly, side proposition brings up many points on side proposition brings up many points on brings up race and gender discrimination and tries to make it a parallel of our case, right? But we see that firstly, race and gender discrimination are extremely different because do you know why? Firstly, those are things you cannot change and they do not directly impact how you act comparative to political views, which my first speaker has already mentioned impacts how it shapes the workplace, etc. And what side proposition refuses and doesn't recognize is that unlike them, we are debating on actually 2 points, whereas side proposition refuses to engage with any even ifs, right? We're actually engaging both on the points where we believe that many of these people that are being discriminated with are extremists, which my first speaker has already mentioned all the legwork behind it, right? Whereas side proposition simply just chooses to cut them out of the debate and say this debate isn't about the extremists and they aren't protecting them in any way, right? But we see that on our side, the chances of them, the extremists being the ones discriminated against, is significantly higher compared to the minorities, right? Because these extremists are the ones that are gonna have these views that they won't be able to work well with the people in the workplace, and we see that significantly impacts how this debate goes. But side proposition simply refuses to engage with that. Even if they refuse to engage with that, right, we still win because we provide we provide counterfactuals and we actually engage with them with even ifs and how we say even on our side, if they don't buy the extremists, we still win on the points of minorities, right? Which moves me on to my next rebuttal. Side proposition keeps claiming that we're sacrificing the majority for minority, right? But firstly, proposition does not state clearly how on our side we are actually sacrificing the majority for minority, right? And us as opposition will prove why we in fact face more benefits to far more people than Prop does later in my speech. Also, even if this is true, we see that by preserving a society with saturated political views, we are the ones who help democracy properly function. And on the worst case scenario on our side, we just have to trade off the majority, which will most likely harm them less than sacrificing the minority. We sacrifice equality for equity, and this helps significantly more. Second, my next rebuttal. Discriminating political views does not include the right for them to express, right? Proposition has clearly not been listening to our speech, right? As we have already mentioned in our first speaker's speech, proposition has not taught about workplace peer pressure. The typical adult works a 9 to 5, 8 hours at least every day, right? Hence, these people who have different political views may be oppressed because they are surrounded by people who have vastly different viewpoints on them. And we see that on side proposition, they're actually even more likely to conform to views around them because they're constantly around them. And if they are gonna be talking about these views, and like we see them more likely to conform on like their side, right? And next, I'll be touching on the POI response, right? We see that, notice here, proposition does not actually fully engage with our argument. Instead, they're actively averting this argument, not providing with us with a proper rebuttal to this. And in first opposition speech, she has already explained and proven why this happens and why this harms the entire working force's productivity, and none of this argument has been actually engaged with. If proposition doesn't buy this argument, in my speech, I will actually further show the effects of this and its significance. Next, touching on the echo chamber point that side proposition brings out, right? We see that this isn't exactly true. While they do interact like a lot and that could cause them to conform, right? We don't see it will be so bad that echo chambers would exist like on our side. Like in like our best case, like echo chambers won't exist because these people do still interact with others. They have like families and they have like cousins, and like they don't only interact with like their like colleagues, right? But even in the best case, right, we would trade it off because we're still keeping the saturated like political views, right? And on to my next rebuttal, right? Diversity, how like side proposition claims that diversity is necessary to like foster an inclusive workplace, right? And like my response to this is, as we have already mentioned in my first speaker's speech, these people spend like great amounts of time in the workplace, and because they are surrounded by people who have vastly different viewpoints from them, right? There's a chance of them being like oppressed or like workplace peer pressure. Like on our side, they interact with like opposing viewpoints less and less, so they're less likely to like feel the pressure to like conform, etc. Right? And on to my last like rebuttal. We are not side proposition keeps claiming that we are not debating about hiring people with like political ideologies, right? See that this is a direct impact to consider. As mentioned, political ideologies heavily affect the behavioral and act of one person. Obviously, it will make an impact on the workplace and like how these people like react to certain things. On to my substantive. Now, even if you don't buy whatever my first speaker had said and my rebuttals, right, I'll be engaging the side proposition's case by providing an even if, where we believe that even if these people discriminated cannot enter these certain sectors, right? I'll take that POI.
So do you actually consider like the right of discrimination as also a humanitarian right for the employers in any case?
We see that just because we consider it, we see on our side we actually do better for these people. We're actually protecting them. And even on the worst case, I'll explain on my side why we still do it better, right? We see that on our side, we are able to increase the number of people whose jobs match their political views. And we'll prove to you how this is significantly more important for the entire working class as a whole. We see that when we allow employment discrimination on the basis of political views, we would see an increased number of people suited for their jobs. And this is simply because we wouldn't want a doctor with political outlooks that will harm the patient, right? This is because that by employing people into occupations which does not align well with their political outlook, even if they themselves wanted to. This is just a counterproductive move for the employers and the entire working population as a whole, because they will lose the credibility and seem like hypocritical, which will affect their overall performance and also the employer's satisfaction with their performance, right? We also see that on our side, when their views match their jobs, it would mean that they're more likely suited for their job and they are significantly more passionate on their jobs and would do better in these jobs. On our side, we win this debate on the metric of scale of people affected, because on proposition side, we see that the worst that could happen is that there will be a significant uptake in employment, but on our side is that there'll be a significant but we see that on proposition side, the worst thing that would happen is a significant uptick in unemployment. But on our side, we would win because not only those that we frowned upon political views are unable to perform well in their job, the vast majority of people using these services that are provided or influenced by this underperforming working class will just have to suffer also because of proposition's whole fairness argument to work. We have to sacrifice the working class to like be able to perform on full efficiency, right? And notice this is an argument on our worst case, and we would still want proposition to engage on our extremist views and how we believe why like the extremists are the ones discriminated against. We see that proposition has actually provided us like reasons why they wouldn't be. If not, we take this debate simply because they don't respond to that anyways. For all that I've said, please side with side opposition.
Okay, thank you for that. Govwip, please.
Okay. So, am I audible?
Yes, sure.
Okay, so robot PRs, please pronounce she, her. If everyone's ready, my time starts in 3, 2, 1, and go. Beginning with the question. Opponents, do you think the right to discriminate is also a humanitarian right for employers? This question is throughout the whole debate, and our opponents never directly answered that, even though we mentioned once in the POI, once in the rebuttal. Moving on to my clarifications. Firstly, throughout the whole debate, they claimed that they discourage discrimination, but not ban. It is fundamentally flawed. Even if the op claims that they discourage, they're flawed because discouragement without legal enforcement leaves power entirely in the hands of employers and does nothing to protect workers from actual harm. Why that's dangerous? Firstly, in the real world, companies don't self-regulate out of goodwill. They act to protect their image and profits. Without legal consequence, they'll continue to discriminate in subtle or overt ways, especially against political minorities or dissenters. Thirdly, discouragement is vague, unenforceable, and meaningless when a job is at stake. For example, if an employee is fired for attending a peaceful protest or posting a moderate political opinion online, the employer can easily hide behind vague reasons like culture fit or reputation risk. Without a legal ban, our opponents prove no way for that employer to fight back. The harm is done and the message is sent. Stay silent or stay unemployed. Therefore, the opposition role still allows unjust political discrimination to happen, just behind closed doors, under softer language. Only the props world gives clear protection that, firstly, set boundaries on legitimate political expression, secondly, hold backdancers accountable, and thirdly, guarantee fairness and dignity for all works, regardless of belief. Secondly, they never proved the burden that we must let them prove that this ban acts more difficulties than harms. They only mention on outtake on unemployment at the end of their second speech, but they never proved that throughout their whole debate. They just take it up at the last minute. And also, our opponents are trying to mix the mechanism of right of employers with the right to discrimination. They're trying to state that they promote this kind of right, even though they discourage it, so that actually they're fundamentally flawed. Fourthly, their claim that political beliefs are different because they're changeable fails to recognize the core principle of discrimination. It is the unfair treatment of individuals based on an inherent characteristic or deeply held belief. Racial, gender, and religious discrimination are based on factors that people cannot change. However, political beliefs, like these other characteristics, are integral to one's identity, personal autonomy, and worldview. Those people align themselves with the political views that shape their interactions with the society, their values, and their vision for the future. We need our opponents to directly prove that. Also, judge, again, clarify. What they want us to rebut at the end of their speech is they prove that they're larger scale. They believe that we'll have unemployment, but they have people unable to perform well. People suffer. Don't you think that a large outtake of unemployment makes people not suffer? Absolutely not. So actually, they're out of topic. Even if the op claims that protecting political expression causes a rise in poor workplace performance, they're fundamentally flawed because there's no causal link between political belief and work ability. Just because someone holds a certain belief doesn't mean they're unable to complete tasks, collaborate, or follow rules. If somebody genuinely performs poorly, they can still be fired. No, thank you. Our model still doesn't prevent accountability. In fact, their logic assumes that they simply have the wrong political view, automatically makes someone toxic or lazy. That is a harmful stereotype, not a credible standard for employment. Therefore, ops rule punishes people not for what they do, but for what they believe, even when their work is strong and respectable. Meanwhile, our rule protects job security for capable workers and still allows firing based on actual job performance or misconduct. We thousands may be wrongly excluded just for being politically different. In ours, only truly harmful behavior is addressed with fairness and due process. Moving on to the most important clash in today's debate, that is, in which world do we achieve freedom and social cohesion, and in which world do we risk suppression and division? Brief explanations. On the props world, we defend freedom of thought and expression by banning political discrimination in employment. This protects a fundamental human right, promotes inclusive workplaces, and helps bridge ideological divides. It prevents people from being silenced or punished just because they hold lawful political views. On the ops world, they say that they will only discourage political discrimination, not ban it, to give companies freedom to choose who fits their workplace culture and values. They believe this preserves employer autonomy and prevents disruption from extremist views. Okay, moving on to the weighing. Firstly, on principle and practical. So why we outweigh on this part, on principle, firstly, is rights are non-negotiable. The right to hold and express political beliefs is fundamental. It's what separates free societies from authoritarian ones. Employers' comfort or image is not morally equivalent to a person's ability to speak freely and hold a job. When a peacefully protester or voter can be fired for personal belief, we signal that economic power overrides the human freedom. Secondly, principle protects all sides. Today, it's a left-wing activist fired. Tomorrow, it's a conservative. If we don't protect those political beliefs across the board, no one is safe from ideological control. We fight not for the one side, we fight for the principle that your beliefs should never cost your livelihood. Before moving on to the practical point, any POIs I'd like to answer? Okay, and no, I will still move on. On our second point, on our second outweigh, that is on practical, why we outweigh on this point, their side argues that banning political discrimination forces companies to accept harmful individuals. And also, they never claimed on how they outweigh. But that's not true, because hate speech, incitement, or workplace misconduct are not protected. We ban only unjust discrimination, just as we modeled in our first speech. Our side protects workers with peaceful beliefs from being unfairly fired, fostering healthier, more inclusive, and collaborative environments. Why we outweigh then? Because we outweigh on two layers. The first layer is focusing on diversity. We improve productivity actually because we believe that heterogeneous teams produce better outcomes, more creative solutions, and stronger decision making. Silencing the political difference creates groupthink and fear, not excellence. Secondly, we respect disagreement, build civic skills. We learn to engage constructively. We do not just build better workplaces, we train better citizens. We want to promote an environment, however, their side, they never clarified that. Last but not least, short-term and long-term, immediate protection and immediate harm. We outweigh because one, fear is felt now, and also the results is right now. A worker attending a peaceful protest, posting political views online, or voting differently doesn't know if their employer will retaliate, and that fear happens now. A op says that they'll discourage discrimination, but without legal backing, it's toothless. No judge. If our opponent argues that, oh, they're contradicting with themselves, because still they argues that this will also creating discrimination thoughts, and they may not perform well. However, judge, we never argued that they will not perform well, and we're not contradicting with ourselves, and that's a piece of preemption. Last but not least, on layer 2, discrimination happens quietly and constantly. It is not just about firing. It is about being passed up for promotion, excluded from teams, or not hired at all. That is also a kind of employment, since that during the employment time, these people are not doing good to their employees. These employers are discriminating their employees. So that is what unjustly is, and that is what we want to justify what we want to ban. For all the reasons above, why we win? Because firstly, they never proved the burden. However, we successfully proved that our side creates more benefits than harms, since we create short-term and long-term effects, and also we're more principled and practical. On their side, even though they claimed that they discharge discrimination, they never firstly provide alternatives that mitigate the problems. Secondly, never provide the link between their contentions and also ours. Therefore, all their rebuttals are flawed. For all the reasons above, we still proud to propose. Thank you.
Can everyone hear me? I will be taking POIs verbally. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Before I begin, some prompt and odd burdens for the House today. Prompt needs to prove that political views are something which should not influence employment prospects. Whether this is true, like whether is this true, how they have said like for some reason political views does not impact like their performance, right? And then we need to prove that having different political views may necessitate being debarred from employment opportunities, and we have to prove that it has significant effects on work environment and why it should be banned, which is what I will prove in my speech. So some of the prop points are fairness in selecting candidates for employment and choosing on the basis of competency instead of basic political views. And they also say that outside undermines democracy and freedom of expression for political views. But my following clashes and rebuttals will take down all of this. First of all, our trade-off. We don't mind discriminating against extremists as their ideas will just be bad. We see that most workplaces will not discriminate against you because of slight differences in political views. Only extremists get discriminated because they are extremely hard to work with. Extremists are hard to work with because they are radical. They centralize themselves on beliefs and show hatred to those who contradict them. The fact that employers hire based on skill is symmetrical on both sides. It is uncharitable for them to think that on our side, employers will not consider the skill set of the person. But another part of hiring a person is how well they work in the workplace with others. They are basically taking away the employer's right to say that this person cannot work well with other people in our company. Some rebuttals for the House today. Prop said that political viewpoints is what separates democracy from authoritarian. But we think Prop is going straight out of point. First of all, this debate is about the workplace employment, not their freedom of speech. Second of all, we're not taking away or barring their freedom of speech. We're allowing companies to choose who to hire. Third of all, Prop has totally lost what the fundamental of democracy and authoritarian is, as people still have the freedom to join clubs that align with their political views. Hence, we are more democratic on our side of all. No, thank you. We think that political beliefs do affect how you perform in your job. You can't be discriminative against those who your job is to serve. We see that political views are reflective of far more things than just your thoughts. We think that thoughts lead to actions. These beliefs have indirectly or subconsciously caused discomfort in the workplace, which is the reason they need to be removed from the workplace. How does the employer know that their political views? They must have said something or done something that made someone in the company feel extremely such as going on a strike or like ruining the company's image by posting extremely radical views on the internet. We see that ruining the image of the company or causing other workers to feel uncomfortable are reasons to fire and not hire someone, and these more often than not stem from their political views. So are you saying the actions of harsh speech and causing colleagues to feel uncomfortable are not valid reasons to fire someone just because they stem from their political views? And yes, I will take that POI.
Okay. So you mentioned on only extremists will be discriminated. However, can you point a clear standard that separates extremist views from legitimate ones, or are you just giving employers the power to decide based on their bias?
We see that minorities will not go so far. We see that like non-extremists will not go so far as to causing discomfort in the workplace, and that's okay. But like there are also extremists who will cause extreme discomfort in the workplace, and we think that employers have the right to remove them if they're ruining the cohesive work environment. Prop fails to prove why the minorities they are trying to defend will not be discriminated in the workplace anyways. The employers not firing or removing the person from certain projects will not stop workplace discrimination. This will lead to discrimination from other colleagues and the employer through speech and other actions. This may in fact worsen the situation because everyone wants them to leave, but they cannot remove this person legally. The minority in this case will definitely feel discriminated and suffer more, and we would rather have them removed from this unsuitable workplace. You claim that the minority will be unjustly excluded from the companies, but that's okay because those who exclude them aren't the right company for them in the first place. They will be happier and better off working with those who share similar political views. We have workplaces where everyone shares the same political views on our side. Prop has been extremely uncharitable in assuming that for example, all workplaces are liberal, but we see that no, different companies have different beliefs, so they should just find one that matches their political beliefs. We see that this is the best for everyone. So if they get rejected from this company, it just shows that this company isn't the right one for them and they should just pick another one. Moving on to my clash.
POI.
And meritocracy versus protection of minority. No, thank you. The employees can join the companies they want, and Prop says the employees can join the companies they want and will not be declined simply because of their political view. But we think that they aren't joining companies that they are being discriminated in, and that's good because it may only lead to them suffering further in the workplace, which fundamentally consists of people with an opposing political outlook. Paul argues that we harm those with opposing views, but we inversely are the ones who protect them the most. And sometimes protecting them just means that we have to be the devil's advocate and segregate them from others. In a world where anyone could get into jobs regardless of their political views, which is Prop's world, what is most likely to happen is that these minorities with niche or less socially acceptable views are going to be judged and systematically be discriminated against. People wouldn't like that, and they have to work with these people that make them feel uncomfortable. So we think that it's better if we just exclude them completely from this work environment that's not suitable for them. We help the minority with varying political views to have a better work environment. In Prop's world, they may have a decent job, but will be constantly discriminated against in their workplace as they are the minority. We will trade off diversity in the workplace because this isn't even a good thing in the first place. Diversity will bring in extremists and minorities who refuse to work with the rest of the team, constantly discriminating against one another, leading to the overall performance of the team to go down and causing a lot of unrest and unhappiness in the workplace. We do not allow extremists to enter the workplace as their ideals will only ruin the work environment for everyone. Even if Prop does not buy that the ones discriminated against are extremists, despite what my first speaker has said over and over again, we still protect the minorities that Prop is trying to defend better. They are not constantly being discriminated against in a majority political view workplace. This is so bad because they might suffer constant discrimination leading to poorer mental health and poorer work productivity. And we would rather have them find another company than keep staying in this company that's just not the right one for them. Because we protect the happiness of more people, we win this debate. The second clash is which is more beneficial towards the working class. We think that Prop's arguments can be completely true, but on our side, we can still win this debate because what matters here isn't their capabilities, but whether they can perform well when entering the workplace. As our second speaker has already presented, people with occupations that may not align with their political outlook may have their cause the performance to be stunted or even face difficulties because their customers or employers are dissatisfied or less confident in their abilities. If Prop's world becomes a reality, similar situations may occur more frequently, and what we end up with is a meritocratic workplace that stunts and hinders the potential of many of these individuals who will otherwise perform better in an industry which better aligns with their political stance. Our weighing is that we ensure that
POI.
No, thank you. We ensure that those working in a certain industry are passionate about their jobs and that their political views are ideal for them to execute their jobs well. We ensure that everyone in the workplace has aligned views and goals, allowing them to work together towards a common goal. They will be able to achieve a lot more productivity and have a more satisfactory experience. Besides, on Prop's case, employers might not even promote them. We see that many goods and services are targeted towards people with certain political views, and we only want those with aligning political views to provide them with the services that they want, right? We ensure that a more productive industry and also better services are being provided to a greater amount of people. We benefit far more people than on your side, and we win this debate. Our third clash is whether political view is a valid reason to consider or not to consider a person as a bad employee. Prop thinks that political views does not affect how they perform in the workplace, which is a huge error. If we let this, for example, anti-LGBTQ person into a liberal job workplace, are they going to ruin the inclusivity of the workplace? Are you saying as long as the harms of this person stems from their political views, it's not a valid reason to fire them? And we think that discrimination stems beyond their thoughts. As extremists, they are likely to participate in strikes outside words and say radical things from day to day. This will affect their performance in work and affect the image of the company. And it ruins the cohesive work environment. Extremists and minorities will feel uncomfortable working with clients that have different political views, leading to even less productivity. So for all that I've said, because we help more people on our side, please side with side opposition. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Speaker, for that. Reply speech.
Can I check that I'm audible at this volume?
Yes.
Okay, I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. So first up, before I move on to my clashes for the house today, right, I have a few points of housekeeping. Firstly, clarifications on whether employers and colleagues are given the right to discriminate, right? We see that addressing this on our side, we see that the worst case scenario, this is symmetric on both sides. There's a clash on both sides. It's on the freedom of expression of groups of people with diverse political ideology. So by letting the minority actively support their views, the majority could also do so. This is something that proposition has to address, and this issue was not addressed in the speech, right? And this issue is less likely to really exist on our side, less likely to exist on our side. And on the best case scenario, because proposition has already pointed out to us previously, and how my second speaker has already addressed this, right? Opposition is willing to trade off fairness of the majority for the minority to remain protected. However, proposition wants the majority and the minority to be treated equally, which won't work due to the imbalance of power and also due to peer pressure, which has already been mentioned but not engaged by proposition. We see that second clarification, whether on our arguments on how prop side affects the performance of employees, right? My first speaker has already mentioned and down the bench that this is simply not true, and you cannot be as productive on outside as they share them. Not true, and we can be productive on outside because they all share the single political viewpoint, and they will be working towards the same mission or goal, right? Also, proposition may have misunderstood our argument on how productive may be affected by political outlook. So I would like to clarify this argument. Aside to the job which aligns with their political view, two things will happen. Firstly, not aligned to their political when they're assigned to jobs not aligned to their political view, two things will happen on their side, right? Constantly having to deal with discrimination, prejudice, and hostility from fellow colleagues, which harms their confidence and makes them even less likely to show their views, right? Second thing, people are using their services are less confident in their abilities and builds distrust to them due to perceived as being hypocrites and less effective performances. And we see that from these two outcomes, it's clear that our argument on propositions were having less effective employees then, and it should have been addressed, but it wasn't. So moving on to my clashes for the House today. Firstly, protection of minority. We see that we already mentioned down the bench why even if they don't buy this, which is just basically minority don't face systematic oppression on their side, on our side, so they better able to work while also feeling comfortable enough to continue supporting what they truly believe instead of on their side. And we see secondly, freedom of expression. Unlike proposition, they keep what they keep saying is that they are promoting fairness and how they can express their opinions, and they keep harping on that fact, right? But we see that how are you so sure that they can freely express their opinions and views? You are simply ignoring our speeches, ignoring the impacts that actually happen when they start expressing their views. Now, what we actually think will happen, which is now a clarification, right? Since obviously they are the far minority with an extreme thought, which is 1 out of 50 people have. These 49 people, I'm just gonna accept and agree with them without any objections or backlash. And proposition is constantly unable to prove how allowing them to work together makes the majority more likely to learn how to be accepting instead of continuing to shun them, right? What we see is more likely, which I've already shown how it takes place, is that they're going to be excluded from how they express their views, and the bullying will get worse, and they're more likely to conform, right? Lastly, on productivity of workplace, I already covered that in my earlier clarifications, right? But we see that on outside, we are able to produce more much more productive workers because they're more suited for their jobs, and they can work in a better work environment and all the other things that my third speaker and I've already mentioned earlier. For what I've said, please side with side opposition.
Okay, proposition.
So my time starts now. Panel, political discrimination. However, our opponents try to glorify it, is still discrimination. They have no difference between the racial, religious, and gender discrimination, right? And our opponents have failed to prove throughout the debate that how they should be uniquely protected. We still don't see the mechanisms here. Opposition is trying to convince you of, people are getting harmed by extreme views, but what do they actually count as extremists, right? Where do we actually draw the line? They have failed to answer the questions we asked, in the speeches, PIs, over and over again, on why should the people be protected when they're simply discriminating the others. They are guaranteeing the right of discrimination, but have they ever considered about the rights of the employees who are being harmed here? Let's do a word comparison then. In the best case scenario, everyone who has extremist views are being blocked. Only people who are neutral are going to work in the same place. However, on our side, we don't ban people based on their views. Instead, we foster a working environment where people are judged and valued by their own working abilities and also working suits, right? So in our world, people are encouraged to engage in political activities constructively rather than simply being shut down based on their personal and political beliefs. We do actually believe that what would end in the result is a less inclusive working environment on their side. People are afraid to express their ideas, and we do actually believe that it's definitely not beneficial for an inclusive and mutual working environment which we are trying to achieve. Even on our worst case scenario, right, we still protect the law. We may have allowed the extremists, some extremists extremists to come in, but these individuals would still be bound by workplace conduct policies, and their harmful actions would be limited rather than just their political beliefs. And we do actually believe that that could be addressed directly through existing legal frameworks and company regulations as we have already modeled it. Some further clarifications that are necessary to be held on here. So firstly, we do like to re-clarify that the right of employers to select employees does not equal to the right of them discriminating the others. There's a major difference between these two, as we had already clarified in the previous speeches already. Secondly, restating our motto, we base ourselves on existing legal protocols and promote fairness and inclusive environments. Thirdly, our opponents fundamentally fail to draw the line between extremists and normal people. They provided no specific mechanism at all to prevent the employers from selecting people who are supporting a political party that they don't prefer. That is harmful, but on our side, we completely prevent it. We believe that all our opponents' responses are rooted in a wrong model. They're saying that they would encourage discrimination, and they're saying that they should protect the people who may have who have different political views, and they especially protect the employers. But then they have never considered about the employees, which are basically at the lower level of society, and they're not really protecting the minorities, just as they have stated here, right? So our opponents throughout the debate have talked about how people with different political views may harm the harmonious working environment and gave us examples of liberty workers. However, just as we had already stated both in our first speech and second speech, we do believe that this motion applies to every single public and private sector except for those where political views are necessary. So that is pretty much unlikely for us to state that liberty workers are considered in today's debate. On the clash of minorities, so while the opposition have claimed that they're protecting the minorities, they're actually doing the right opposite. By allowing employers to discriminate the others based on their political beliefs, they're enabling the exclusion of political minorities, those with unpopular or dissenting views, and thus, Judge, we're the side that are actually protecting the minorities, so please vote for us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Speaker, for that. Thank you, everyone, for a very nice debate. Panel, can we move to room 8 for deliberations, please? Room 8. Join breakout room 8.